could not hold any public office and only Christians could do so. Hindu children whose father had died were supposed to be handed over to the Jesuits for conversion. Hindu women could inherit parents' property if they converted to Christianity. Hindu Good morning, students. I hope each and every one of you is enjoying your life. Oh, oh. What dumb question did I ask? Early morning when I enter the campus, I can see significantly good number of pairs occupying different areas like corners of the campus and utilizing it to the optimum level efficiently and effectively. And then on the day of reports, your parents will come and say, "How is my child feeling? These marks are unexpected." Sometimes I feel that I should do the bold move, but then I control myself. Anyway, y'all should be thankful to me that I haven't told this to principal yet. Otherwise, y'all would have been under CCTV surveillance by now, and the principal would have been monitoring y'all from his cabin. So now y'all know whom you should not mess up with, or else be ready to bear the consequences. Anyway, that's your life. Make it large. But I don't think whatever you are doing is right for the sacrifices made by your parents and ultimately our freedom fighters, our ancestors who fought for the freedom of Goa. I know others are also there for this lecture, but we already know about Indian freedom struggle and I understand they were also our ancestors, but this piece of land was very special and precious back in those days. It is today and it will forever be. So, without misusing the time, let's dive right into it. And I want 100% attendance plus attention from now on. So, let's dive right in. So, now let's go back to the time immemorial. Goa was first ruled by the Kadambas, then it was under Vijayanagara Empire for some time and later it got into the hands of Adil Shah of Bijapur. Now under this Muslim ruler, local Hindu community was being oppressed and discriminated against. So they wrote to the king of Hornavar, who was a Hindu king, to do something as they were being oppressed by this Muslim ruler Ibrahim Adil Shah. Acknowledging the problem of our ancestors, the king of Hornavar sent his General Timur to Goa and then he realized that he was not capable enough to afford a war with Adil Shah. So he was looking for a counter solution to counter Adil Shah. And this was the time when Alphonse the Advocate was in coaching with his fleet of ships. And the king had heard about him. So he met him and convinced him to start a war against Adil Shah to acquire Goa, ensuring that there will be local support. And as expected, with local support, Alphonse the Advocate fought the war and conquered the territory of Goa. And now Alphonse the Advocate was the new ruler of Goa. And the king of Hornavar and his general were in shock because they never expected this. They were actually wanting to reward them with a bounty and expected them to leave. They were Portuguese traders, right? Anyway, the decision was taken by the Portuguese and the consequences were right on its way. After taking control over the territory of Goa, the Portuguese were not as friendly as their Goan ancestors expected them to be while they were fighting against Adil Shah. In fact, after taking control over Goa, spreading the word of God had already begun, but in a very subtle way. But soon they realized that few who converted were repeatedly going back to their actual roots and following their actual culture and tradition. This really pissed them off, and immediate orders were issued to destroy all the temples and transfer temple properties in the names of Catholic missionaries. When nothing worked to meet their expectations, the missionaries were open and smart enough to learn the local language community to preach Bible effectively and to understand public sentiments. But all these formulas failed, and finally in 1546 Francis Xavier proposed the imposition of Goa Inquisition in a letter addressed to the Portuguese King John II. This is the point where the life of people in Goa and Hindus especially was going to become bad to worse as it got implemented. And with time, the more and more orders were issued, the freedom of the people in Goa got lesser and lesser with time. And the orders were not just orders, were direct atrocities on the local community. All Qadis were thrown out of Portuguese territory. For your information, Qadi is a judge, is a Muslim judge who interprets and administers the laws of Islam. They were out of Portuguese territory. Non-Christians could not hold any public office and only Christians could do so. Hindu children whose father had died were supposed to be handed over to the Jesuits for conversion. Hindu women could inherit parents' property if they converted to Christianity. Hindu clerks in all villages were replaced with Christian clerks. Christian gaukas, basically freeholders, could make any decision without the presence of Hindu gaukas. However, Hindu gaukas could not make any decision until and unless all Christian gaukas were present. Christian gaukas were to sign first on any proceedings, and also in legal proceedings, Hindus were not acceptable as witness, and only statements from Christian witnesses were admissible. The condition was so bad that Hindu priests were not allowed to enter Portuguese Goa to conduct any Hindu wedding. In fact, people in Goa were even prohibited from speaking their own language, that is Konkani. Even gatherings were not allowed, and Hindus were not allowed to follow their rituals and celebrate their festivals, and so on. This continues until 19 December 1961. But there's one date in history, that is 18 June 1946. Let's see what happens on that day. 18 June 1946 at Margao. This is the day when two friends decided to sow the seeds for the freedom of Goa against the dictatorial Saraja's regime. The friendship of these two revolutionaries is unforgettable for the people of Goa. Now I know that you are already getting very curious, but now I'm not going to tell you, because there is this one more person whom we are forgetting, and I think it deserves more than my mention. So the person is Dr. Cristiano di Braganza Cunha, in short TV Cunha. The father of Goan nationalism was a true gem and a brave heart, as he was the first organizer of the movement to end the Portuguese rule in Goa. He also established Goa Congress Committee. He was court-martialed and sentenced 8 years imprisonment and was deported to Portugal in Finnish fortress, where he was later released but was not allowed to enter Goa. And finally, Goa lost its braveheart on 26 September 1958. But the torch which he had lit was already burning in the heart of every Goan. And finally, Dr. Julia Menezes and Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia became the torchbearer of Goa's freedom struggle. Now, how much do we actually know about these two personalities, and know how the scenarios were and how they came together to give us the freedom what we are enjoying today? So let's dive right in. Dr. Julio Menezes is the son of soil. He played a very important role of Goa gaining freedom from the Portuguese. He was born in South Goa in a village known as Asalna. He studied in Goa, and after which he went to Berlin in 1920 to get graduated in medicine. And Berlin is the place where he met Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, as he was the secretary of the union, and during this time their friendship grew, and it was a friendship that would play a great part in Goa's history. As he was done with his studies, when Dr. Menezes returned to Goa, he worked with Club de Asalna and tried spreading nationalist thinking and nationalist activities. But Goa was not ready for it, and he faced a lot of opposition. So he then moved to Bombay in 1939, where he started Gomantak Prajamandal. Dr. Menezes also started bilingual weekly called Gomantak, which was available in Hindi and Konkani back in 1942. Through it all, he and Lohia were always connected, and he even invited Lohia to come to his house to take rest after his medical examination on the former. Accepting his invitation, Dr. Lohia came to Goa in 1946 Now, it was during this visit that the two of them sat and discussed about the situation of Goa and made plans to turn things around. So, now who is this Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia? Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia was born on 23rd March 1910 in Akbarpur, eventually came to be Uttar Pradesh in North India. Born to a prosperous family, he was raised by his father from the age of 2. After his mother died, he stayed in Bombay, Varanasi and Calcutta and finally ending up at prestigious Frederick William University, today's Humboldt University in Berlin. He was such an outstanding student that he received financial aid for studying national economy as major subject as a doctoral student from 1929 to 1933. Dr. Lohia later became an activist and a socialist political leader towards the end of British Raj. He also worked with Congress Radio, which was broadcast secretly from various places in Bombay until 1942. While recuperating at the Menezes home, the two men sat and made plans to start a civil disobedience movement in Goa. They started by going against the ban of public meeting which was imposed by the Portuguese regime. It would be the first time that anyone had started such movement while the Portuguese ruled Goa. When people sharing the same sentiment came to know that Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia is in Goa, Menezes' home was visited non-stop by the people to meet these two men. Both the gentlemen addressed a crowd in Penjing, which was the first public meeting on June 15, 1946. At that time, police was also stationed at the meeting, but they did not intervene at the gathering. Carried by this success, Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia and Dr. Julia Menezes decided to hold another meeting on 18 June 1946, which we today know as Goa Revolution Day. On this day, these two people were greeted by a lot of people and they said Dr. Julia Menezes ki jai, Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia ki jai. But this time the police did intervene and this time they were really very unlucky and they went into the prison in Penjing. But the people who had gathered for the meeting got the taste of what it could be, so they refused to back down and the police could not get them dispersed nor could stop them from chanting slogans, and they were continuously demanding the release of the two men. Ultimately, both men were released that day, but Lohia was taken out of Goa and set free. After this incident, Dr. Menezes went back to Bombay and continued making waves through his newspaper. He also published a book called The Goa's Freedom Struggle in 1947. But the struggle for the freedom didn't end after this incident. The Portuguese oppression could not crush the Goans' desire to get the freedom which was taken away from them by the Portuguese. Freedom fighters like Prashant Trivikram Vaidya, Vishwanath Lavante, Sudhir Fatte, Nana Kajrekar and Mohan Ranade gave movement energy and direction to Goa's freedom struggle, and in turn were indirectly contributing to Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli's freedom struggle, which were also Portuguese occupied territory in India. Madhu Limaye, a disciple of Ram Manohar Lohia, played a key role in freeing Goa, and in the process he was sentenced 2 years imprisonment in Portugal jail from 1955 to 1957. Mohan Ranade had to spend 14 years of his life in jail in Portugal. He had arrived in Goa in early 1950s as a Marathi teacher, but he then started taking part in attacks on Portuguese police station. His last attack was in October 1955 at Betim, after which he was sentenced to imprisonment. By this time, India had already gained freedom from the British rule on 15 August 1947. Yet Goa was not the part of United India. Hence, in 1950, the Government of India, under the leadership of our first Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, invited the Government of Portugal, which was led by the António Salazar, the PM of Portugal, for a negotiation regarding Goa, which he completely ignored it and said that Goa is a part of their mainland territory, Portugal, and cut off all kind of communication with India. Now the main question here arises is that why were they not willing to give up on Goa? So students, at the end of the day, everything comes down to business. Goa provided an excellent harbour facility, and even according to sailing condition, Goa was perfectly positioned. Goa was used as a trade center for the goods coming from Malay Peninsula and eastern Portuguese territories. And moreover, Portuguese wanted to keep their position here intact, for which they always gave the reason of safeguarding the interest of Goan Catholics. And there are multiple other reasons. And to be very honest, during this duration, many things happened which triggered tension between India and Portugal. Anyway, in 1952, India started tightening its control over Daman and Dadra and Nagar Haveli, as these two territories lacked any military garrison and Portuguese only used police force to maintain law and order. Hence, India cut off movement of all goods and people through these territories, thereby cutting all connections with Daman and Dadra and Nagar Haveli. But in 1952, India-backed group started protesting in these two territories, which included RSS, Azad Gomantak Dal, United Front of Goa, National Movement for Liberation Unit. Meanwhile, Portuguese asked for permission for reinforcement, which India denied, and this is how Dadra and Nagar Haveli got freedom from the Portuguese rule. But in a similar protest by locals in Goa on 15 August 1955, Portuguese government fired upon 30 people who lost their life, which got covered by the world media, and Portugal was heavily criticized for it, and also the international support it was getting became less after this incident. While India was trying to settle the matter of Goa in a very calm and peaceful manner, well, in fact, it had once warned about the military action but never did so. Everything was going in the right momentum until 21st November 1961. An Indian passenger boat was passing through Anjadiva Island and Kochi Island, and Portuguese forces started firing against this boat, which led to the death of one Indian passenger. And this incident provoked Indian government and gave them all the reason to attack Portuguese forces. And this retaliation by the Indian government is popularly known as Operation Vijay. India deployed its all three forces, Army, Navy and Air Force. For full and final assault. And then PM of Portugal refused any truce with India and gave extreme orders of either win or die to his Portuguese forces. This order made the war unavoidable. Operation Vijay started on 17 December 1961 by the capture of northern borders of Goa by the Indian troops. By next day, which is 18 December, most of the Goa was already under the control of Indian army. Meanwhile, Salazar gave extreme orders like using scorched earth tactic, destroying all the resources while falling back. If you are wondering what is this scorched earth tactic, so then I'll give you a brief understanding of it. It is basically a military practice wherein the Portuguese army was destroying all the resources which could have benefited Indian army or Indian navy or Indian air force, like roads, bridges, buildings and so on, and even all these considered a resource in scorched earth tactic. So they were destroying them. After this step of Portuguese forces, Indian Air Force came into action and started destroying runways. Back then, Portugal did not have any air presence in Goa, which provided additional advantage to Indian forces. While all this was happening, INS Mysore and INS Trishul liberated Anjadiva Island. Naval Battle of Mormugao was also a part of this operation. And boom! Finally, Operation Vijay was completed in 36 hours, making Goa a part of its mainland, India. And finally, on 19 December 1961, the Portuguese governor Manuel Silva signed the certificate of surrender, as he realized that continuing war would simply mean loss of life of Portuguese soldiers. So, thank you Manuel Silva for handing over the freedom which always deserved to us. So, we really appreciate this gesture. And finally, as the Indian Armed Forces reached Penjim, they got the love and appreciation that every Goan was having for them, because they had provided Goans the freedom which was very precious, and they were really happy, and their happiness could be seen on their face that day. Even today, you can feel the happiness of the freedom on every Goan's face. Do check it out next time when you meet your Goan friend. It will reflect on his smile. So, yes, the day 19 December will always be a memorable day for every Goan. So, thank you. That's it for today's video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and support this channel in whatever way you would like to support it. Just do it. And finally, thanks for watching. See you soon. I'll be back with the bang.